Yeah, thanks, Fred. Once again, it's nice to have Bruce DeMaeyer in our division. Bruce, like I said, was with the Division 10 when he lived over in the Lexington area. I think it was the Division 10 hosted the MCR convention, and I think 2016, whatever year it was, Bruce had his layout opened for tour, and I got to see it, and it was like a lot of us, the layout was about half completed, but it was a very, very nice layout. So it will be neat to see today what Bruce has done with his Louisville home. So Bruce, thanks, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. I will start the program with my opening slide and give you a little bit of information about myself. I'm a fairly long time national model railroader in the 10 to 15 year range. I have been in model railroading 3 times. When I was a kid, it was a train around the Christmas tree, American Flyer, 1956 style. My brother and I learned all about tinsel on a track, and it acted like a fuse and all of those kind of things. My mom would never let it go any more than just a circle around the tree. So it was a once a year event, although we did sneak a couple of times in putting it into the dining room and that sort of thing. That was my first venture. Obviously discovering cars and girls after that took me pretty much out of the model railroading world. And it did not come back to me until until my son was in his early teenage days in Indianapolis. And I built my first 4x8 sheet of plywood with telephone company apparatus doing all the track switching and all that kind of stuff. Atlas N scale. I had never seen N scale prior to that. And that was what we did with my son. He discovered cars and girls. And so that thing disappeared from the basement pretty. We again turned to the third layout when we lived in Wyoming. It was time for the grandkids to see what a 4x8 sheet of plywood would look like, and Fred is adjusting here.
I am, because the guy who was sitting there before was a little taller, and all we can see is your nose and higher in the screen.
Okay, thanks. And my grandkids came out to visit us, of course, Christmas time and all of that. It was a fun 2-3 days, and then it just sat there for the rest of the time. So when we finally made the big move into Louisville, I had a big basement, I had a lot of room and a lot of time, and I decided it was time to make my layout. I just chose N scale because really that's all I've ever done. I chose Caddo track because my cousin is a vice president of Caddo in Chicago at Schaumburg, Leon Waldeck. Some of you may know the name. He got me my parts and first stuff, and so that was how I got to the beginnings of my time in Lexington. The Lexington project was partly computer driven in terms of the beginning of it, and most of it was trial and error, and it took me a very long time to do it. I went through carpal tunnel surgery and had to do all my painting with my left hand. It was all bad. Russ was off by 1 year. In 2015, we did the regional convention in Lexington. I was chairman of that, and I had my house was open for tours, and 2 people showed up at my house for the tour because I could only do it on Sunday because I was so busy with everything that was going on in the convention. And Russ Weiss was one of them. So Russ, you are the first and only that I remember from that day. Okay, so let me continue on with the presentation then. I'm going to start out with a little bit of philosophy of design and how it affected me. There's a guy that did a pretty good book. You can get them, through the usual Kalmbach things, by the name of Lance Mindheim. And he gave these basic elements for, I think, everybody that's going to design a railroad. How do you do a realistic, buildable model railroad and recognize that it's more than just the track plan. How do you design an effective plan to first understand the goals that you have and want in your layout? What's the theme? What's the prototype? What's the era? And what are the operations? Then you got to mesh those goals with your constraints. How much space? How much money? What are your skills? And how much your time? That comprises all of the issues that relate to building a railroad. And one of the things that he spends some time talking about is knowing yourself. The point of making strategic planning your top priority is so that your design is targeted towards and aligns with your core interests and available resources. And in other words, know yourself first, and then design towards your true interests and situation. Now, most of you will be able to take that into a personal understanding of what that meant. But you really have to do it for yourself, and you got to know what your interests are. For everything on your layout, there is a reason. Every element in your layout design must have a purpose, even if it's only a supporting one. If it doesn't serve a purpose, don't incorporate it. The result will be a good overall design with a sense of utility, balance, and unity. What good design is not? It's not typically what you think about. It's not whether you use 12-inch or 18-inch radius, number 4, number 6 turnouts, or some other technical minutia. It isn't just a track plan. Track is only one element. It needs to dovetail seamlessly with scenery, industries, structures, both singly and in combination. What are the factors of good design? It doesn't matter how technically correct or how pretty the drawing looks on paper. If it never gets built, it falls short. What other hobbyists think of it, the degree of exposure it receives, the number of compliments it gets are all irrelevant. Even though the track plan graphics are artistically pleasing to the eye, that too is irrelevant. To dig to a deeper level, a good design must focus like a laser on your true interests and passions. And for an example here, I'm talking about the layout pictures that you see in Model Railroad or Model Craftsman. You know, they look beautiful. They just look absolutely beautiful. They're irrelevant to you. You don't learn and gain anything by looking at those kinds of things. I don't think. So ask yourself the following questions. Where's your enjoyment going to come from? Is your interest the satisfaction of assembling it? Or do you want to look at it like it's a painting? Do you want to watch trains running, or do you want to interact with them? How important are prototypical operations? How often will you operate your layout? How passionately and deeply immersed are you in the hobby? How much time do you have to work on the layout? What's your skill level? Are you interested in improving that skill level? And how long will you be in that house? And that one hit me like a ton. Okay. Do you want to have or build a layout? You want to have one, or do you want to build it? Are you interested in photography? What aspect of the hobby do you enjoy the least? What's your modeling speed? Are you interested in highly detailed scenes, or do you have a good enough attitude? Are you modeling one place or a number of different places? How much layout do you want to bite off in terms of complexity and just plain old construction time? What most of us really want, I think ultimately, having spent a lot of time talking with my friends in the business and hobby, ultimately, we really want a sense of being transported to a different time and place when we look at our layout and or operate them. If you participate in public layouts like I do in T-Track, and you go to the VA hospital like we did in Lexington, and you sit and listen and watch the people there, they will all talk about, I knew that from when I was a kid. I remember that. I remember this. I remember that. It's remembering those different times that created your like for the hobby. So the more clearly you can articulate the specifics of that end game, the more effective and successful the resulting layout will be. Designing towards your target, your interests. What are your modeling interests? Rail fanning, structure building, scenery building, rolling stock and locomotives, scene composition, art viewing and movie watching, operations. I look at Facebook stuff incessantly. And most of it, 80 to 90% of my Facebook is model railroading, one way or another. And there are a huge number of people that seem to end with the track on plywood. And that's it. That's where it stops. You don't get the sense that there's more to their life than that. And that's okay, but is it enough for what you want to do? How do you manage complexity? And I got to tell you, layout, design, building, and everything else is complex if you're going to do it right. Effort is definitely proportional to size. A 4x8, a door, a basement, they are all different in terms of the effort. Time and difficulty gets translated in how many turnouts do you got? What are the complex track features that you're in? Are you doing flex track or snap track? A 20-inch scene, a 20-foot scene, sorry, running through a grass field is large but not complex. The same theme running through deep canyons and raging rivers will take 10 times as long to build. The factors of complexity, turnout count, clearly in my opinion, that's the biggest complexity factor. The square footage and bench work width, the grades required, urban scenery, vertical scenery. What's vertical scenery? Mountains, high differences. Bridges, viaducts, tunnels, double track main lines, multiple decks using helixes, which I do, and your age and your experience. Maintenance and progress. Modelers most often grossly underestimate layout maintenance. The layouts are inherently complex and very important to see progress when you're in the process of building this. How long are you prepared to wait for it to be done? Track, balance, scenery, structures are all important. And don't forget roadways and sidewalks and water treatment for streams and rivers. Tony Koester's approach in a book is that the good enough approach applies an 80-20 rule. 20% of the effort and detail levels produce 80% of the visual impact, except that only some of the key scenes will be finished, and in all likelihood, some will remain unfinished. So on to my new layout. Everything I have just said has been overridden by my desire to replicate my new layout from my old layout. I liked that old layout, and it had some pretty darn good plans in building it. But I'm keeping most of that old plan. I'm adapting it to the new real estate, and I'm fixing all of the weaknesses. So I'll continue with my fundamental direction on my Versailles layout. My theme is Western Mountains. I'm prototyping BNSF and Union Pacific. The era is very modern. And to that extent, I'm extremely unusual. The operations are very modern industries and the way they operate. What are my constraints? Obviously, keeping peace with the real estate manager. She's a very tough person to deal with. The space is in a finished bar area in our new home. It's not a newly built home, but it's new. It's a new home to us. Our size of the home is dramatically reduced in scale and size from Versailles. We had a horse farm in Versailles and big house, all the rest of the stuff, and just could not continue to live that life of bigness. I'm getting older and I am running out of time. I built a similar layout, like I said, in our last house, but we had to demolish it and to move down to a downsized house. And as much as I tried to modularize it, it ended up almost totally having to be destroyed because I couldn't get it out of the damn basement. Okay. And so it's kind of like the story of building a your airplane in the garage and you can't, or in the basement, you can't get it out. The real estate agreement that I had with my wife said I can use the 2 long walls of the basement in the dedicated space. And that was all I got. My tools, and I'm going to carry some interesting layout construction tool ideas to you. Some of you, I'm sure, have used them. I bought a Bosch professional laser measurement device, little thing that you walk around and it measures distance. And it is a beautiful tool to use when you're putting together something like a layout, because it lets you measure precisely the walls and how far you are away from various things. I have always been, for my entire life, a Macintosh person. So I am my computer focus right now is an iMac Pro 27. I use Microspot MacDraft PE for my 2D CAD. And you'll see CAD drawings in my layout. So my layout gets put into a CAD drawing before I even begin the process. By using Rail Modeler Pro, I have purchased a Black & Decker Crossfire auto level laser, the red line and the red line this way. And I'll give you a momentary data on that when I'm in a little bit further into the program. I believe absolutely, totally that every wire in your layout needs to be labeled. Because if you don't, you're never going to be able to figure out how to fix something. And I bought a Brady 21 Plus wire labeler that uses nylon tape, and every end of both ends of the wire has a label name on it. I have a DP Craftsman hot knife for foam. It's a commercial long bladed thing, and it really cuts beautifully through the foam. It emits a lot of smoke. It'll occasionally set off the fire alarm, but you can work with all those things. And then I have a workshop of power tools, most of which are getting smaller and smaller. I have a great big skill, 7.5 inch circular saw. It's too big. I'm now down to a 4.5 inch, just a small one. So my power tools are going down to smaller size. All right, there's my real estate agreement from the real estate lady. You come down the steps and into the basement, and along these 2 walls, which are 28 feet long each, I'm allowed to put my layout. There is an existing bar that's in here, and there's an existing closet that's wrapped around in here. It's fondly known to Nancy and I as the cat room, because the people that lived before we moved in stored their cats there. And then it has a walk area over to my office and exercise and workshop area over here, and a big, huge home theater here that was put in, and I was not allowed to touch that space at all. Okay. So if you look at this layout, you'll notice I have a big bump out here, and that's huge. That's a 6 foot across section. Why is that there? That is my mountain scene that I had on my Versailles layout that I got my Scenery AP award for, and it was a beautiful piece of work. It was essentially a model of the Glacier National Park snowshed environment along the southern part of the park where the BNSF runs its Highline Transcontinental. And there was just no stomach that I had that I could not figure out how to use that somewhere. And it needed to be that big to work. So what is the real difficult part is this little space right here where I got to go between this walk area. Okay. And so the real estate agreement has allowed Nancy to concurrently reduce the size of this a bit, so that we're doing some remodeling on this bar, and the bar will get a little bit smaller. It will come out to about right here, constrained by that post right there, which is the steel post. It's for the construction of the whole house. My operating track plan. Okay, there is the plan. Okay, and I will get into each of these sections a little bit more. This is the mountain area, and you'll notice that it's 6 feet across. There is a track that runs the back across the back, all double main track. So if you follow the double main, I'll start right here. You go around here, come around here, go through here, go up and over and back down and around here and come back to the yard and so on. That's my 28 linear feet twice to be able to tell you the size of the layout. I'll get into more fine detail on the design of each of these as we go. Double main track. It'll have 5 double crossovers, essentially double crossovers leading into both sides of the big huge yard, and those reversing the double crossovers, excuse me, are there to be able to allow entry into from either one of the tracks. I have a major reversing loop that's required to interface with the helix and staging yard. My staging yard is going to be underneath. You'll see some drawings of that in a minute. But you come up single track, you come up and you go down single track, engine first. And you need a reversing loop to be able to get it to the west direction or east direction as you come up. I'm operating those tracks bidirectionally from an operations standpoint. You can be running on either one of those 2 tracks. And so literally I've got something in the neighborhood of 21,000 scale feet of almost 2 miles in each direction. 3 principal towns, Whitefish and Columbia Falls, Montana, and Idaho Falls, Idaho, are what I'm focusing on from my things. They're not all in the same area as my layout, particularly the Idaho Falls plant. 3 major industries: barley malt plant, wood products plants, and a mini refinery. The staging track plan. Staging will be provided on a lower level layout. There's a helix, 6 loops down, basically 16 inches of drop. And there will be a double-sided single loop 5 track, multiple train stacking staging yard that will be accessed by this helix, 16 inches below. What do I mean by this? Well, my trains are not going to be more than probably 10 to 15 cars long, maybe 20 if I double engine them. And I got a lot more space to that in each one of these yards. So when we do operations, train's going to come in and essentially stay unitized and just continue to move around that section until it's ready to go back out again. So that's all part of operations, of course. Each track in the staging track is going to be 46 feet long. And I'm assuming Wi-Fi camera and yard monitoring. It's much better than the old days with the switches that you had to do. You can use Wi-Fi now and all that kind of stuff. Double-sided yard allows me to use a single common arrival and departure track to avoid backing trains down the helix and into the yard. And the only problem I have with all of that is, what the hell do you do if you're coming up that track from the helix and you lose the back half of the train? And you got a 2% slope heading down, going back to that yard. And I haven't had it happen to me yet, but I know in the new one it's probably going to happen. Okay. All right, there's my staging track. It is designed to be able to store track store trains coming off the helix and into here and around here and around over here and back onto the helix. And there are frames that are built, not different than my benchwork frames, that allow me to get inside and move around inside this layout. This is 3 foot across, 3'10" across. And so this ends up being tight shoulders, but it's good to have that space so you can back in there and work. I don't expect my yard dispatcher to sit in there, but he could if he wanted to. Building the benchwork. Okay, so let's get down to the facts of how to do it now. We spent a lot of time remodeling our house in Louisville last year. In fact, a lot of time and a lot of money. Another fact, I am too old to be hauling around 4x8 sheets of plywood and cutting them on a bench saw. And that led to some more negotiations with the real estate manager. And we asked our carpenter that did much of the destruction and rebuild of the kitchen and master bath and bedroom to help me build the benchwork. And that was a really smart idea. The construction of the benchwork, it's all 3/4 inch pine plywood. It's 3.5 inches by 3/4 inch plywood. And it's all construction cabinet grade plywood. Okay, and that's important because of its stableness and its ability to not do warpy dorpies. And I built those into 4x8 frames with, I said corners glued, but at the last minute we decided not to glue the corners. They're only screwed. It is all take-a-barable. There are cross members. If you think about a wall and a frame, there are studs. There are cross members here that are then spaced 24 inches apart underneath the plywood deck, which is a 1/2 inch plywood, screwed to the frame, attached to the wall studs, and supported by 2x2 poplar legs with adjustable feet, all of which were brought with me for sales, and more of them built for this one. So that creates the benchwork deck. And this picture is sort of a compilation of how I gave drawings. Again, my emphasis on how much I did with this on the computer. You're seeing here the frame, 4x8. Here is the pieces of cross members. Notice this one's angular here, and it's got a notch here. That notch is where the trains run down to the helix in the back. So it needed to be notched out of those sections in here. Okay. And then all of these are precisely cut, precisely sized here from a material standpoint. There are the legs, so on. And this is what I gave the carpenter. And he built these in his shop in Nicholasville, Kentucky. And the day we put this back all together, he brought them out separately. 2 of my friends from the guys in Lexington, Larry Smith and Frank Stevenson, the 4 of us put the bench together in 4.5 hours, and we were 1/4 of an inch off of scale. I mean, the thing, it went in beautifully. We put a board on the wall right where the laser said it was supposed to be. We tacked it into the studs. We took the frame after we built it. We put the frame, we laid it on top of that. 2 guys held the other side of it. Bap, 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 bap into the studs, stuck the legs on the front, moved to the next one. And just within 4 hours, 5 hours, we were done. It was beautiful. The entire deck of that layout then is now covered with a 1-inch thick polyfoam and gives me 13 scale feet of below ground space to be able to use for drainage, ditches, ponds on the layout, and so on. The section on the right side, top of the layout, so think about that layout, and you'll see in the drawing, is covered by an additional 2-inch thick sheet of polyfoam. So I'm now 2 inches above the base and 3 inches above the plastic. There are 2 long sections of 2% grade, providing access to those 2 different levels on the layout. Okay, so here's the same plan that I had showed earlier from the sizing standpoint, describing my scenery plan. Starting at the bottom is Whitefish, Montana, with a borrowed barley plant from Idaho Falls, which is where Budweiser makes all of its barley for all of its beer. And it's a really cool plant. And it's going to be basically prototype built. I've got it probably 80% finished. There is a yard. The yard is a double-ended fiddle yard, and it's really 5 yards all in one. There's a maintenance facility. There is a maintenance of waste storage area. There are drill tracks in it. There are arrival, departure, the whole bit. But that represents about a 15 or 16 foot space from one end to the other of a N scale yard. Around the top is my mountains and snow shed. I'm putting in a mountain sawmill, which is very traditional for that area, and then a boutique kind of fuel refinery, which does show up a lot up in the upper western part of the country, where they do unique kinds of things like a diesel refinery. Okay, and that's what this is going to be. Special structure effects. I have the prototype snow shed that is already built. And it was, if you have been to the Glacier National Park and you have seen the snow sheds there, they are just big, heavy duty wood and steel roof kind of things. 90% of them don't do snow sheds anymore because the trees have grown back. And what they don't tell you about the problems that were there about snow sheds in the earlier days of trains, they took all the damn trees out to make ties. When you took them all out, guess what happened with the snow? Okay, they had nothing to stop it or keep it from going down, so you had to put all these snow sheds in to fix it. Very costly solution. The prototype snow shed is really a beautiful piece of art, and I got a merit award for it on my structure side. You saw my mountain fire station in one of the awards that I got 4, 5, 6 months ago, or something like that. It is a literally prototype design from a fire station in California, a mountain fire station, and it is really detailed prototype, and I got a merit award for that. There's a prototype Shell gas station that's already built. I got a merit award for that. I am then in the process of completing my refinery, my Budweiser barley plant, my prototype Whitefish depot. And I don't know if any of you have ever been in that area in Whitefish. They have a beautiful, BNSF has a beautiful Amtrak depot, and I am building it, the prototype, and it's going to be really beautiful. Prototype wood, forest wood mill is in the design stages now. I am in the final stages of my prototype McDonald's, modern McDonald's, and then several town businesses. All of these structures are designed on MacDraft. Okay, here's the bud yard. So this kind of gives you now a feel for a little bit of the operations. Here's the double main coming around this way, here and here. Here is the line coming up from the basement, from the helix, which up and down brings trains in from Chicago or trains in from Seattle into the staging yard. So Whitefish sits in between them. So from an operations standpoint, you're going to be able to see a Chicago to Seattle, a Minneapolis to Seattle, a Minneapolis to Portland kind of thing. And they all come up and go down in the same place. But to get them down, you got to take it around a great big reversing loop here to take it around this way and back in to go the other way. So westbounders got to go around loop, eastbounders go on, and on the other way around when the eastbounders come back, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. The main yard is shown here, and it is significantly reduced in size from what I did in Versailles, because in Versailles, I had the standard Caddo separation of 33 millimeters. And I found that 33 millimeters is about the size of your fingers. And so if you wanted to play in that yard, you had no room to move anything on that track without knocking another train off on the other side. So I literally removed every other track. So I've now, my yard and here is significantly smaller, and it will be significantly better because of it. But it covers 5 different yards. I have a classification yard, arrival departure, block switching, which is mostly what I'll be doing in that. It's going to have an Amtrak station, got to be Amtrak because Whitefish is a big Amtrak station, which is also a crew change for both BNSF and Amtrak. And engine maintenance will be done up in this area up here, where there will be a 3-track engine maintenance facility. There'll be a fueling and sanding yard, and then a block switching intermodal yard up here. Now, that doesn't exist in Whitefish, the intermodal yard. I suspect someday it might, because they're doing more and more of that, getting into smaller spaces where they're building smaller intermodal yards now instead of the really big, huge ones. And block switching could let you do that. You drop off 5 or 6 intermodal cars, and then you go on with the rest of your life. The Columbia Falls Industries yard is the wood products yard. So this is going to be all wood products here. And over here is going to be all of a refinery. The trackage here, this place is the biggest worry that I've got of all. This crossover and set of tracks over here, because it is 1, 2, 3, 4 feet away from the edge. And so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put a manhole over right in here, that if things get really bad and I got to go do something, I can take it out and go inside there and work on that over there. And that's the only way I can fix that. I've got one of those things they call a creeper, but I can do that pretty nice at 3 feet, but 4 feet's pretty bad. From a derailing standpoint, I have re-railers everywhere around this layout, okay? So that if anything happens, you pop a rail and you want to get it back. If it goes through the re-railer, it might fix itself. But this one worries me, and there was hardly anything I could do about that without making it really complex to be able to get in and out of this yard. There is over here a game switching layout. I forget, the name of it now is away from my memory, but it's the 5-4-3 thing where you get 5-4-3 cars and you got to move them in and out, all that kind of stuff. I have no idea whether I'm going to use that. I put it in for sales, never used it there. It's back in here. I may never use it here either. Okay, so it's classic Western Industries, refinery and wood. There's sufficient storage for loads and empties. Possible switching puzzle, big time structure project, the oil refinery and the big wood products section. And I showed you the one troublesome area. There's my lower level staging yard. There's the helix. It's a 6-track, 6-layer, single track helix that you come from the rest of the world, Spokane and Chicago, around the helix 6 times, out of the helix and into a one direction or the other. I think I'm always going to use it in a rotational direction, that the trains rotate in and here, and then they can stage park along that track and then be taken out and up around the helix and up to Spokane or Chicago. So there's the statistics of that staging yard: 6-turn, single track helix, 36-inch diameter, 9,000 scale feet inside that helix. 5 double-sided. Yes.
Hey, Bruce, Russell here. I didn't mean to interrupt, but while you're right there on that slide, what is the grade in the helix?
2%.
Okay, all right.
It's 2% on the helix, and it's 2% on the incline coming in. And the other ones, there's another set of risers on the main track that are also 2%. And it's basically, it's basically 2 inches and 8 feet in N-track scale,
Yeah, and
and that's enough to rise.
right, and I think if I gathered from your last layout, you had mostly modern equipment, and that's what it's going to be on this too. So you can have depending on the length of the train, you can have 2 or 3 units pulling it up the helix.
I'm hoping that it'll be 2, and I'm going to constrain the size of my trains to about 10 to 15 cars.
Yeah, and these are again, the theme is mostly modern, like the last one.
Yeah, not mostly, total modern.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thanks. I will let you continue.
Okay. I think I stopped at the end of the first bullet. 5 double-sided staging tracks. There's 5 of them in there. They're 46 feet long. That's 38,000 scale feet. Each track is divided into 3 detected power blocks, so that from an operational standpoint, you could put 3 trains in there and know where they're at. There won't be engine ID. I just can't stomach doing that with Digitrax, but you'll know something's in the space. All of that translates into hopefully 15 unit trains with a total of 15 to 20 cars each, providing realistic, uncomplicated, protected yard for your operations. That's my hope and plan. From an electronic standpoint, I got my electrical AP when I was in Lexington. I'm a Digitrax person. I have a Digitrax controller with separate auxiliary layout power. The only thing that's run by Digitrax power is the track. All the switches, all the other stuff are all run by a separate auxiliary power supply. I have 8 power districts planned. I am going to do JMRI controlled mainline turnouts and ability to use smart Wi-Fi throttles on them. And I'm only doing JMRI on the main line. The rest of the yard switches will all be done with capacitive discharge, lighted toggle control for all of the yard switches, including station. And the toggle control will all be lighted. And I'm adding lighting in the yard with a little tiny device that's red and green so that you can look and you can see what the switch situation is by looking at the yard, not the switch plate. And then I know some of you guys are deep into Arduino. I am also in it with basically an Arduino controlled lighted speed and interlocking signaling controls. So you'll get a chance to see an alternative design to Russ's beautiful design that he's got. Mine's a little different, okay? All using Arduinos. My civils, I'm projecting to try to get my civils AP done this spring, but I'm not gonna use N-scale, I'm gonna do it on HO. It's just a hell of a lot easier. I'm gonna exclusively in my layout use Kato Unitrack, wood tie and concrete tie. The stuff is bulletproof. I mean, it is a non-negotiable issue to me. The smallest radius on the layout on the main is 12 3/8, on the yard is 11. And the tracks are always going to be fully ballasted to get rid of the Kato look. You cannot tell it's Kato track when you see the finishing job on ballasting. Main tracks are going to be switched with number 6 high-speed turnouts. Again, JMRI controlled. And the yard tracks switched with modified number 4 turnouts, and all of those will be basically toggle switch controls with capacitive discharge to make the Kato thing work. All of that was designed by Rail Modeler Pro. My modern operations, I'm planning on getting my dispatcher AP for this coming spring prior to even doing all of this, because I've operated on so many different layouts. I've got the time and effort and all that kind of stuff to be able to get my dispatcher AP. And I'm planning on doing that this spring, but I'm going to use my layout as the plan for action. It's going to design a continuous sequence of modern block switched unit manifest trains. And as I've said earlier, the staging yard represents Chicago and Seattle endpoints. Transcontinental unit trains will make appearances with activities in the Whitefish yard, basically block switching of 4 or 5 cars that are headed for Whitefish and picking up 4 or 5 cars which are heading for Chicago. It'll be designed for 4 to 6 people in operating sessions with train running, yard switching work, and dispatching. Okay, that's my plan for my new layout. I hope, all things being equal, I'll have trains running on the double main in September. And that will be the first and only test of anything really running from a train standpoint. I'm not going to touch anything in the yards or anywhere else until the main tracks are operating flawlessly. And then I will move to the building of the yards kind of thing. And that will include the equivalent of a main track for the helix and the stuff downstairs. My helix and my staging should be working September or so. Any questions?